Welcome on back, everyone. So I finally got onto the PTS and I got to test some of these new proc sets. I was very eager to see how the scaling would work on them, and I think that ZeniMax is on the right track by making them scale off of specific stats instead of just being the static values that they used to be. However, there are some serious issues with how strong some of these sets scale to be. So in this video, I'm going to go over these changes and we're going to take a peek at these proc sets and how they're performing on the PTS. As always, if you guys enjoy the content, feel free to hit that like button. It helps me a lot with growing the channel. And of course, if you guys want to stick around for more, hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, let's take a look at this. So, if you guys didn't know already, procs have been changed so that they scale off of a certain stat. Every proc set has an allocated stat that it will now scale off of, be that weapon or spell damage, max magicka or stamina, your total armor value, or your total health. There's a link to the patch notes below where you guys can see all the different sets and what they are scaling off of now, so you can do some testing yourself or theory crafting for the future. So let's start out by taking a look at some of these damage sets. So ZeniMax had stated in the patch notes that any procs that will scale off of your weapon or spell damage will be just as strong as they were on the live server if you had 5,478 weapon or spell damage. Now, with the addition of the new CP system, everybody's character has significantly more weapon and spell damage than they did with the old CP system. So as you guys can imagine, it's not actually that hard to push that 5,400 weapon damage. In fact, it's not hard to push well over 8k weapon damage on the right build. So naturally, I wanted to test these procs on a build that was pushing around 8 to 9k weapon damage. And as you guys can see from the video here, naturally the tooltips on our procs started to get really insane. And this is where the first big red flag showed up for me. The tooltips should never be in the 20k for instant burst damage, especially not if you have 4 separate procs hitting your opponent at the same time. Needless to say, when we put it in a practice situation, it resulted in a build that could easily one-shot 40k hit points without even using a skill. Well, in this case, we did need a poison attack like Poison Injection to proc one of our sets. I also think something really worth mentioning here is that I did not have the Malakath band on when I was doing this test. This build has around 9k weapon damage, and that means we're going to be nearly twice as strong versus the live version of these procs on the PTS. And I don't need to explain why this is going to be a huge problem. We lived through one of the worst proc metas in the past in this game where you would literally get one shot if someone bashed you, and well, this looks an awful lot like that. Quite simply put, at this point, your gear is pretty much doing all the work for you, and you know, that really takes away from skilled gameplay. I think something that we can reflect upon here is that we're going through a PvP meta right now where procs are disabled, and this is one of the most enjoyable PvP patches that I think the community has had in a long time. So for me to see this on the PTS, it's definitely not something that I'm happy about. However, I do think that this is something that can easily be corrected by ZeniMax. And specifically, I think the answer here would be to drastically increase the required base weapon and spell damage in order to have the procs reach their previous maximum values. I think 5,400 is much too low. I think 7 or even 8,000 weapon damage would be a much better point for procs to start scaling from, simply because it is super easy to build very high weapon and spell damage builds nowadays. But in general, I think all of the scaling points need to be drastically increased as well. I think that weapon and spell damage is definitely one of the bigger culprits, but even hit point scaling starts to get out of control when you start pushing 50 or 60k hit points. And of course, something like a Necromancer is going to be able to heavily abuse a max hit point set to the point where it will feel pretty broken. Now, hit point sets will be at about the same strength if you have about 38k or so max health. Seeing as most people aren't pushing over 50k health, I think this needs to be increased for sure, but not as much as the weapon and spell damage one. I do, however, think that sets like the Crimson set need to be looked at, especially in the hands of a Necromancer. They can do some pretty ridiculous stuff. And also, healing sets that scale off of max health are going to be a huge problem if people stack enough hit points, because they will be almost impossible to kill. And that's just due to the sheer amount of healing power that you can get out of some of these sets. Now, the sets that aren't that huge an issue are the ones that scale off of the max stam and max mag values, and that's simply because out of all of these stats, those are the hardest to push really high, and the value has already been set at 38,000 magicka and stamina. And then, of course, there are the sets that scale off of your armor. And these are ones that I think definitely need to be looked at as well. In general, I think ZeniMax could benefit from doing a full audit of this change and just looking at every single set and deciding on a good value for where that weapon spell damage, max health, armor, and max mag and stam values should be sitting at. And I will be perfectly honest, this will be disastrous for PvP if this patch goes live like this. It absolutely must be changed, because if they leave it like this, the meta will be procs everywhere, and nothing else will compare to how much damage, healing, and survivability proc sets give you. Well, maybe there will be one non-proc set that everybody uses too, and that's going to be that new mythic Sithis set. Looking at this fight here, I'm using the Sithis set on a build that is using a bunch of different proc sets, and it's very apparent that my friend on his Sork not only is struggling to stay alive, but he literally cannot hurt me on this build. So it's basically going to create a PvP environment where if you're not running these very specific sets, you are going to struggle big time against everything, and you're going to get face rolled by people simply because they have better gear on than you do. A couple other things I wanted to mention is that the Templar health-based healing skills feel very strong, and I actually think that Health Templar could be meta in this coming patch. It definitely feels way stronger than it has in the past, and on par with things like High Health Warden. And unfortunately, the PTS is crammed full of bugs. If it wasn't KristoferESO not properly getting the instant cast, it was literally the sets I was wearing not functioning. I tried the 5-piece Crimson in a test, and I actually couldn't get the Crimson set to work on my character outside of the original build that I had put it on. I'll be honest, as a veteran player, this is one of the worst things that I see on the PTS, and I absolutely hate when patches get pushed live and they're full of bugs. And ZeniMax unfortunately has a very bad track record of doing that all the time. So this is my attempt to plead with you here, ZeniMax. For the love of God, please fix the bugs in this patch before you push it live, because the issues in this patch are going to affect combat at a huge fundamental level that not just PvP players will notice, everybody will notice this. So there you guys go. That is my first impressions of the PTS when I actually got on it. Honestly, I was excited for this patch, but after testing what they've put into this new patch, I'm not excited anymore. I really want to see a lot of changes made, or this is going to be a patch that I will not be very interested in, and I don't think that other PvP players will be very interested in it either. I would love to hear what you guys think about what we kind of discovered here today, and if you guys have done any testing for yourselves, I would love to hear what kind of conclusions you've come with these proc changes, and just the entire impact of what's coming into this new patch on the PTS. I'm also going to leave a link in the description to a video that Mad Shadowman did, where he was testing some of the health-based proc sets on a Necromancer. I implore you guys to check that video out. He makes a lot of good points in his video, and I think it's well worth the watch. As always, we do the top 5 here, so if you guys want to send in your own clips for the top 5, you can send them to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. Give me a follow on Twitch if you guys want to catch that live gameplay. Check me out on Twitter if you guys want to keep up to date with me. And finally, check my website, KristoferESO, out if you guys want to find written guides to all my builds, as well as a hub for all of my ESO content. We are sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers, and they can give you better ping to your favorite games. They're free to try for the first month. Link down below in the description for you guys. And then last but certainly not least, a massive thank you and shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, I couldn't keep doing this job, so thank you so much everybody for supporting. Thank you everybody again just for tuning in and watching today. As always, I hope that you guys enjoyed, and have a great night everyone. I'll see you next time.